I want to talk about what should we do. As I was introduced, I have been to many locations around the world. I'm learning about different domiciles, what's brewing in crazy countries around the world, and I want to help. So to me, I just want to come here and say, hey, first of all, how should we think about this phenomenon? And then what should each of you be doing? What should you do, right? Because I really want to provide that as kind of a value, right? Because one thing I'm painfully aware of is that your time is not refundable. So I better give you something, right? So that's my hope. My hope is I can give you something. So cryptocurrency here. I'm getting very excited. There's a regulatory sandbox. What is needed from the perspective of a location and a domicile is regulatory certainty, right? The United States SEC is not providing certainty or clarity. They are providing a framework that's based on legacy legal code from the 1930s. They're applying this security thing called the Howey test, and this is not certain. One of the great things that's happening in domiciles like Lithuania is you're getting a sandbox and you're getting legislative regulatory certainty. Super exciting, and I think that this will be a wonderful example for the world. I think there are other jurisdictions also that are providing this certainty, and I think the smaller jurisdictions provide unprecedented access to regulators, legislators, ministers. As you can see, we had a minister on stage today here. That's amazing and powerful. Another domicile that I'm interested in is the largest crypto economy in the world, which is Japan, first country to legalize Bitcoin. The location of my crypto invest fund, I have a $30 million crypto invest fund based in Japan. We invest worldwide, and we bring top quality teams to Japan. So that's our mood. If you look at the interface between fiat currency and Bitcoin, 55.6% of that is in Japanese yen. So Japan is not only the biggest, but in fact, it's bigger than everyone else added together by a lot. So, the United States is about 25% of that interface. 38% of total global cryptocurrency exchange volume in Japan. So Japan is a beast. It is an amazing, amazing place. Plus, it's full of Japanese people, which I think is kind of cool. I like them. Another thing to look for. Oh yes. So tomorrow I'll be going to Malta. I think that was my previous slide. I'm not sure. Oh, there it is. So I'm moving my exchange. I actually co-founded an exchange called Evercoin, and I'm moving the exchange to Malta because of what? Regulatory certainty. They're passing legislation called VFA, Virtual Financial Assets. So we will have a license, which is exciting, and we will be housed inside of the Malta Stock Exchange, which I think will be a great place from which to access, again, ministers. Tomorrow night we're at the presidential palace doing a dinner party. So I think it's Malta's exciting, 400,000 people. It's also very small and very potent. So I wanted to talk about how to reason about this phenomenon. I'm kind of wondering, I'm putting in clicks, but there we go. So is this a good investment? Maybe. So depends on when you got in. Depends on when you got out, right? But let me give you a couple more clicks, and you'll probably have a better perspective on this as an investment. This thing is not clicking. I just want to let the team know. So this is not a good investment. This is Lehman Brothers. So Lehman Brothers is the largest bankruptcy in the history of the world. It's about $600 billion of balance sheet reduced to zero. And people say Bitcoin is like tulip mania, right? If you want to know tulip mania, the thing that's important to think about is, what is tulip mania? Tulip mania is the price of tulips goes to the moon. And what does it do next? What does it do next? It goes to zero. And what does it do after that? After it goes to zero, it stays at zero. Actually, tulips, not quite zero. Tulips are worth like $1, so they're not zero. But the point is, if you want tulips, you have it here. Lehman Brothers. Lehman Brothers is tulips. It went to zero and it never recovered, right? So the point I want to make is, Bitcoin is something else. So the question becomes, what is Bitcoin? This is Lehman Brothers. September 15th, 2008, right? Very important date. So I wanted to share a different perspective. And the perspective is about what happened to the credit easing balance sheet of the United States Federal Reserve, right? So what I want you to do is watch fall of 2008. So as you can see, lending to financial institutions spikes. And if you look at the vertical axis, these are trillions of US dollars. So at in this area, it's 1 trillion. And now we're up in the upper $4 trillion range. So basically what I'm indicating is that the Federal Reserve is now in a fundamentally, irreversibly broken state compared to what it was before. We were in a very beautiful, steady state, and now look at where we are. It's crazy and broken. So we are $12 trillion in money printing downstream of that, and 654 interest rate cuts downstream of this event. So this is a cataclysmic event. And in fact, if you ask Bill Gates, will there be another financial collapse? Bill Gates says, it is certain. It is a certainty. And I think this is the major theme of my talk, which is, if a collapse is a certainty, then what should we do? Right? That's a great and big question. So imagine that you're standing in a high location. Right? Speaking of collapse, so now you're standing on this beam, right? It's a metal beam. And watch the foot. Watch the second foot. How much weight do you think is on this foot? 50%? 51% maybe. Maybe not. Maybe 1% less, a lot less, right? Now, imagine that this beam is the fiat economy. And imagine that the last person you saw on the beam, this guy named Lehman, walked down on the beam and the beam collapsed and Lehman fell to his death, right? And now imagine that the same people put the same kind of beam up, and now you're walking across this beam, right? What do you know about this beam? What you know is it is certain that it will collapse. So what do? Well, the thing is what you do is dependent on the situation. So what happened next? So this guy, Satoshi Nakamoto, this is actually Dorian Satoshi Nakamoto, who is provably, this guy he's about as Satoshi Nakamoto as Craig Wright. So he's another fake Satoshi, but he looks like he could be a Satoshi. So picture picture you're still in this high place, and this dude shows up with a different beam. And this new beam is made out of something you don't even know. It's like, what is it made out of? It's made out of some weird metal from like a crashed UFO, right? And he puts it down, right? So what are you going to do, right? You know the beam you're standing on is going to collapse, so what do? Do you like jump on the new beam? No, like you don't jump on the new beam. What you do is you put a little bit on the new beam, maybe 1%, just like the skateboard. You put like, okay, a little bit, and then you take the weight off, right? You take it off. And then you like put more weight, and then you take it off, right? That's what you're doing. You're testing it out, right? If you look at the price of Bitcoin, it goes up, and then it goes down. If you're testing a store of value, how do you test it? You test it by putting money in and then taking it out. And why do you test it by taking it out? Because you want to know that it's storing. You want to know that you can actually put it in, and you also want to know that you can take it back out, right? So what does that mean? What it means is that you should see in the price of Bitcoin, you should see that it will go up, and you should see that it will go down, and then you should see that it will go up higher. And then it'll go down again. And then it should go up even higher, right? It's done that 5 times already, right? So for sure, it is not tulips. Like, it is not tulips. So that's something to note. So I do want to give you guys something, which is there is a thing called the Book of Satoshi. And it's a real thing. It's a book. And it contains emails from Satoshi Nakamoto, the real Satoshi Nakamoto. It's amazing. It also comes as an audiobook. And you can listen to this stuff. Amazing. So, if you haven't, read the Bitcoin white paper and check out the Book of Satoshi. Super recommended. You'll never be the same. It's amazing. So there was an economist that wrote an article, and it said, we've had experimental currencies before, and they failed. Bitcoin is an experimental currency, therefore, it will fail. Because there's nothing new. It's just another thing that we've already seen, right? Crazy mindset. Super crazy. Because what we have to understand is we have to understand that there's this thing that we're currently calling a blockchain. Bitcoin is based on a blockchain. And what you have is you have trillions of dollars worth of transactions with no trusted third party. And there's no person on earth that can point to a single transaction and say, that's not what happened. So on an internet that's completely full of like fake news and bullshit, there is a source of truth, and it is a truth that is based on consensus. So if that's not new, like, I don't know what a new thing would look like. Like, that is as new as can be. That has never existed. We've never been able to do that in the history of humanity. And that is the foundation for an internet of value, which is different from the internet that we have. So I'm what I call an open source money maximalist. Not a Bitcoin maximalist, but Bitcoin is the most important and senior, and it solves the hardest problem, which is the hardest problem is, what do you do when you don't trust anyone? What if Alice and Bob don't trust any nodes, any third party? And what if none of the nodes trust each other? That's crazy. That's super hard to solve, and it's solved. So open source money is going to do to money what open source software did to proprietary software, which is it's going to hollow it out. And so this is the cause of my Bitcoin Pac-Man. He's going to eat all the money, starting with Bill Gates. Nothing against Bill Gates. Bill Gates is actually kind of like neutral on Bitcoin. He said good things, and he understands that there is some amazing fundamental technology. So I think Bitcoin will eat Bill Gates last. So I wanted to also talk about this next emergent phenomenon, which is really like the so-called ICO phenomenon, and it's really about token selling. So this chart will show you, this is actually Elementus, which is a design firm, and it's a graph of data associated with ICOs. So that is the Ethereum ICO. You could buy Ether for 14 cents. That was a good price. And they raised 19 million USD. Now, right around early 2016, you ended up seeing the DAO, which is 168 million. And the DAO was kind of the birthplace of Ethereum Classic. And what you notice that I said that no one can point to a transaction in the Bitcoin blockchain and say that didn't happen. Different for Ethereum. Because in the Ethereum blockchain, that's why you had the fork to Ethereum Classic, which is the DAO hack. So, but look at what's happening now, right? Like this is now Q1 2018, and you're talking about 23 billion USD of ICO. Just a quick side note on this big yellow dot in the middle, the Petro. That thing's kind of a mess. Like, it's really an unhealthy thing that has occurred there, which is it's probably the first and largest national crypto, and it's funded by people who think it's funny that there's a communist dictatorship in the Western Hemisphere. So I think China's in there, Russia's in there, Iran is in there, So basically enemies of the United States. It's also funded by narco cartels. So like this is a very weird ICO. And it's very large. And I think it's a little unnerving, right? It's a little disturbing that such a thing exists. What I wanted to do to display this, though, is I wanted to help answer the question at the beginning, which is, what do we do when we're certain there will be collapse? And here's the fascinating thing, right? Which is that if you actually look at the current price of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, there are major signs of unhealth, right? And one of the signs of unhealth that I can describe to you is everything is tracking Bitcoin. Bitcoin goes up, everything goes up. Bitcoin goes down, everything goes down. Everything's tracking Bitcoin, right? What does that mean? What it means is if you take two ICOs out of a hat, the market looks at them as the same. It looks at random ICOs, right? It's going to invest in them proportional to Bitcoin, right? That's so unhealthy because it means that the market has no discernment. And what it means is the market is awash in speculators and not investors. And the speculator mindset is a mindset that's driven by things like the fear of missing out, right? It's driven by trading ticker symbols where you don't even know who those people are. And the thing that's crazy is it looks more like public equities or even like a casino than it should look, which is it should look like venture capital. Because what's happening in this phenomenon is people are giving bags of money to other people. That's the reality of what's happening. And if you're participating in investing in ICOs, you're giving bags of your money to people across the internet. And you should be paying attention to who those people are. And the reason why I'm passionate about this is that there's a wonderful complexity theory about collapse. And it models, the researcher is a guy, Perbach, and he models the whole thing as a pile of sand. So you have a sand pile, and the sand pile has avalanches that collapse, right? And you have a perfect power law distribution of collapses. One big collapse, and then smaller and smaller collapses, and many, many very small collapses. But collapse is inevitable. However, what can you do, and how do you reason about collapse? So the way you reason about collapse is that you can actually figure out how to make the sand pile taller. So the question becomes, how do you make a taller sand pile? And the answer is it depends on the shape of each grain of sand. So what does that mean? Let's imagine every ICO is a grain of sand. You can imagine two shapes. One shape I call marbles. Marbles are perfect spheres. And imagine now piling marbles. How high does a pile of marbles get? Not very high, because they just spill and they just don't. Why do they not go high? Because the marbles don't support each other. That's the problem, is the marbles don't support each other. When you look at an ICO, you have to ask the question, does this ICO support other ICOs? For example, does Petro support other ICOs? I don't think it does. If you picked out one of these things that's like a pure scam, it does not support. In fact, it erodes support. It decreases support. It steals energy, right? Those are like the marbles. On the other hand, if you look at platforms, so think about the Ethereum ICO. Does the Ethereum ICO support other ICOs? Crazily, it supports. Almost this entire crypto economy is on top of Ethereum. Super supportive, right? When you look at emergent platforms like an EOS, that intends to support, and in fact, this number is wrong. It's not 2.5, it's actually closer to 4 billion. And this is an entire ecosystem in the making, and it will support future ICOs. So to me, the question then becomes, well, what is it that you should do, right? One of the things I'm excited about here is that you have a regulatory environment, and you have investment, and you have talent, right? And so you can build an ecosystem. That's interesting. You can build an ecosystem that can serve as a platform, right? So the question that you should have when you get to the answer of what should I do, could we get the slides back? The question that you should have is, how can what I am doing support my ecosystem? And as an investor, you should be resisting FOMO and hype, and you should be resisting kind of the temptation to kind of day trade. And you should actually be thinking about investment. You should be thinking about people. And you should be thinking about how my behavior supports the ecosystem. And I think that's really my answer to kind of what should you do. So I think with that, I think it's lunchtime. So thank you very much.